Welcome to the Fully Alive podcast.
This is Andy.
And I'm Jonathan.
And this is a podcast about truly living in the midst of the grind.
Welcome back to the Fully Alive podcast with Andy and Jonathan. We appreciate you coming back for episode 2. We got a lot of fun things to talk about today. Andy's surgery, what it's like to run long distances in diapers. So we're going to have some fun today. But in any event, Andy, how are you feeling after the last one? What were you thinking?
Well, it's good to have folks back. It's good to be with you, Jonathan, as always. And I was thinking I talk too much.
Well,
I was like, man, our audience is going to have to be really patient.
Right. Well, you can tell that we're not professional podcasters. It's our first episode. Hopefully we get better as we go. I guess some people.
Well, that's always the plan, my friend, right? Get better as we go.
Exactly. So, I think where we left off last time was we were talking about your decision to go into surgery, which I think is always a fascinating decision. I am of the camp that no surgery is minor surgery. Like people always go, oh, I'm going to go in for a minor surgery. I don't even know what that means. Anytime someone's taking a knife to my body, it's a major event in my life. So,
yeah.
But we didn't really talk a lot about your full thought process on what it was like to be going into surgery, right? I mean, you're facing the fact that, whatever it is, a week or even days, you're going to be on the operating table, having your prostate removed. A lot of things can go wrong. What are you thinking about in those kind of days to a week ahead of the surgery?
Well, that's a good question. None of this is scripted, so I have to kind of think on the fly. But, I don't know about other people, but I totally agree with you, Jonathan. Anytime you're cutting body parts out or off, cutting them at all, to me, it's very serious. And since I'm married to a nurse and my oldest son is a operating room nurse, they both say the same thing. So for me, I had as I mentioned, a great desire not to have surgery. So now, after discussing it with our surgeon and looking at the options, discussing it with another high-end urologist and looking at the options, I'm thinking, even though this is not what I wanted, this is my best option for long-term results.
Right.
And one of my favorite business coaches, very famous guy, says, the secret to success comes down to one thing: long-term decision-making versus short-term decision-making.
Right.
And so I thought, well, if surgery is the best for long-term, then that's what I need to do. And even though I'm dreading, not the surgery is a tough surgery. It's a 5-hour surgery. They're cutting out your prostate. They're deciding how much other stuff to cut out depending on where the cancer is. And, you're guaranteed some level of incontinence after the surgery. You're guaranteed, a certain level of ED after the surgery. And neither of those sound attractive whatsoever to me.
Right. On a scale from 1 to 10, those are both like 10, is it not ideal?
Yeah. It's like, please, let me just fall on my sword versus,
right.
But I was like, well, when you commit to a long-term plan of success, you've got to be willing to pay the short-term price. And so my understanding was that if all goes well, those side effects would last anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. And
right.
I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Holy cow. So I was struggling through that. And I was struggling through the fact that it could be worse if things don't go very well, depending on how much of the nerves they have to cut away and stuff like that. So there was certainly some significant soul searching going on. And I know maybe I'm just egotistical, but I just thought, man, this is really tough. I mean, my wife and I have a great relationship, and she was very supportive through the process. But it's just hard because I have not experienced either of those two side effects up until now. And I was like, wow, life is going to change either for a period of time or permanently. But I need to trust that, if my heart's in the right place, if my belief system is centered properly, if my mind is, at peace with the decision, that good would ultimately result. And so I was back to having some lengthy conversations with my good friend God. And I don't know, after those conversations, I felt a reassurance that I was on the right path. And even though that was going to be hard, that I was going to be okay.
So when you're talking to God, are you saying, look, if we can minimize anything, it's got to be the erectile dysfunction, right? God, is that?
Yeah, that's like there's some big negotiating going on with that. Right. That's for sure.
Right. Like, I'll do an extra 2 months in diapers if I can, lessen the erectile dysfunction by 2 months. Right.
Yeah. Well, they say your sex life peaks at 18 and then it declines after that. Well, it may decline, but I don't think it declines a whole lot.
Right.
So yeah, right. That was a tough pill to swallow for sure.
Right. No, I mean, and that's the thing that I think, at least for me, it was really interesting, because, I was helping you with the research, and I had no idea just how intricately linked the prostate was to so many of those functions. Like I had never heard of any. I mean, I know people that have had a prostate surgery or prostate procedures, and I've never heard of anybody talking about erectile dysfunction, about incontinence. So I was like, wow, these are not your ordinary side effects.
Right.
But yeah, so you're talking to God during that time. How did you get peace around your decision? What was it that made you feel ultimately like, hey, this is the road that I need to go down?
Yeah. Well, to me, peace is a combination of inner tranquility, like I'm okay, it's going to be okay. Ultimately, I'm not talking airy fairy, like everything's going to work out the way I want. It's just that ultimately things are going to work out okay. So that's inner tranquility and outer relational harmony. Like, are we in line? Am I connected to and in line with the key relationships in my life? So, as I was processing, all right, I have to do something I hate. I have to do something I don't want to do. The side effects are profound in my personal value system and estimation, because I'm a very active guy and I'm very out and about all the time. And, right. The fact that, you're in a diaper and, you could have leakage or whatever. I didn't know. I was totally ignorant. I mean, I'm hearing all this for the first time myself. And right. I'm talking about it with Suzanne and like, it's okay. She's like, it's okay. But as I'm talking with God, the sense has always been, I have a little mantra: live your life in such a way that if what God says is not true, you'll be totally destroyed. Now, that's easy to talk about, but it is a hard way to live, to always be putting yourself out there based on what you believe you understand about God and the way he does things according to what I see in the Bible. And I'm not going to get into it too much, but let's just say as growing up a total party animal pagan, dirtbag, and being a total skeptic about God up until I was 18, day by day since I'm 18 years old, I have tried to read the Bible, do what it says, and then play the detective. Let's see what happens. And I've tried to prove it wrong for over 40 years now. And so far, I personally have not been able to prove it wrong. Like what it said, I did. And what I did ended up working out well for people involved. It was never easy, but it worked out well. And so there came a point in this that was like, okay, Andy, you tell people that you have a friendship with me. You trust me. Are you going to trust me with this? Do I have your back on this, even though you don't like it, or not? And I had to come to the conclusion that he's had my back for over 40 years now, and probably before that. So, I need to trust him. And once I got to that kind of decision, like, okay, I don't like it, but this path makes sense. It looks like the path that I felt like, whether you believe in God or not, I felt like this is what God wanted me to do. And so I was like, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to do it. And let's see what happens. And at that point I was pretty at peace. Like, even though I was having surgery, I was pretty calm about it.
Because the thing that was interesting was, you never surgery for you is always something you said from the outset, I don't want to do it. And we've said this before, so I'm not just repeating myself, but you kind of went through this period where you realized it was probably the best option from a medical perspective. But you couldn't accept the reality from just like who you were and what you believe in. And you're just sitting there going, okay, I understand it's the best medical option, but I still don't want to do it. And it's just not necessarily for me.
That's exactly. I know everyone's telling me this is what you need to do, but I just don't want to do it.
Right. Exactly. And then, you just sort of, I don't know, I just was talking about it. And one day you're like, yeah, I'm going to do it. It's just, I've got peace about it. It's what I need to do. And it was interesting because it seemed like that kind of came out of nowhere for me. If you think about making, a decision around that time, and you're thinking about, well, I have to decide on surgery, that's always has potentially a lot of pitfalls. I also need to think about what happens if I have a very aggressive cancer, and when they pull out the prostate, it's spread and I have more significant issues. Are you doing anything like mentally? Like, are you creating a bucket list? Are you thinking, there's things that I need to do, that I need to accomplish? Are you thinking about, the fact that your life may shorten? Are you trying to get some things in before you have surgery? Like, what are you doing leading up to that, to that decision, not medically speaking, but just like your own emotional, mental health?
Mm-hmm. Well, at this point, we're pretty sure the cancer is aggressive. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm going through my mind like, okay, if this goes the path, like my mom, where it was like diagnosed and gone within a year.
Right.
Okay. And so, I've had a bucket list long before I ever got sick. I think about, Braveheart, when it came out, I forget, in like the late 90s or whenever it came out, every man dies, but not every man truly lives.
Right.
I thought, okay, I'm thinking it was the first movie I ever saw like 3 times in the movie theater the first week it ever came out. Just crazy, because I just thought, this is something,
Right. Total guy movie.
Yeah, total fest for sure.
Yeah. My wife wasn't so into that movie, but
yeah.
what a great
Bad
movie.
Gladiator in
Oh, I know.
2000, just,
Right.
but there's always been something in me. Like I felt like I was I don't think, I honestly don't think I'm anything special, but I always felt like I'm a person of destiny. I
Right.
think that's true for all people, but I really felt like my life on this earth was going to count for something long after I'm gone.
Sure.
And so I've always been on the path to live for that destiny. And the first thought I had when I was figuring out that I had aggressive cancer, which I was shocked about, which we talked about, was not is my bucket list like fun things I want to do. And yeah, I definitely have fun things I want to do. But my bucket list was more about, did I accomplish what I felt like I've been put on this earth to accomplish? Like, it's really interesting, when you look at the psychology of human beings and, Maslow's hierarchy of needs and all that stuff. But basically, everyone wants to feel like they have value. And the two of the big inputs to that deep sense of value is security, I'm loved for who I am, and significance. My life counts for something meaningful and lasting.
Right.
And it's funny because women gross generality, tend to focus on the security aspect a little more on their key relationships, even though they do many significant things. And men tend to focus a little more on that area of significance. But if you look at the core fears, if you study psychology and look at the core fears of men and women, men fear not having an impact. That's their core terror. Like if they dip their hand in the water, there's no ripple. Like their life has no ripple effect. And women tend to care, again, gross generalities, and I'm not trying to pigeonhole anybody, but tend to focus more on the fact that invisibility. Like if will you see me? Will you receive me? Not violate me in any way? And so these fears are swirling around in us. And now I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, what if I do die sooner than later? I haven't accomplished what I thought my destiny was going to bring. And so I was feeling not like I need to go do a bunch of fun things, even though I like doing fun things and I do a lot of fun things. But what can I do to, what will I do if this goes really sideways to make sure that my contribution to people in history is what I think it's supposed to be? Or I could even say what I think in my friendship with God, he feels like it should be. So I felt a sense of urgency, but I knew that I needed to have answers to my situation. And I also was finding peace in the fact that, I've done some of the significant things that I felt like I'm on this planet to do. So if it doesn't work out, I guess that's going to have to be enough. And it's going to be another step of trust for me to say, it's going to go from here. I'm not going to see the end game, but it's going to go from here. So all that was swirling around, and I don't know if I've done a good job of describing it, but that's about the best I can do at the moment.
Right. Well, I'm glad that you prefaced your comments saying that it's gross generalities, because I think that our wives would agree that we know nothing about women, right? So it's like anything that you said is
so
probably
with my
dead
daughters
wrong.
too.
Right. Yeah. Anything you said about women there was probably totally wrong. But
yeah. And I apologize in advance. I know I'm a Neanderthal. All our women out there, I'm so sorry. Please help me.
Right. Yeah. But I think that when it, at least for me, I mean, I do a lot of estate planning work. And so I talk to people a lot of times when they're late in life, and, that sort of feeling of, did I make an impact, and have I had, does my life have meaning? That, and can I see the impact I've made to validate that my life has had meaning. I think those are things that everybody thinks about when they're,
Yeah,
at
I'm
least
curious.
most of the men that I
I'm
talk
curious
to.
about something, Jonathan. I mean, the story I just described, you have dealt with a lot of millionaires, billionaires, whatever, um, who are planning for the end of their life. How is my story different from often the stories that you've experienced? Again, generally, I'm not asking you to, pigeonhole anything or anybody, but how does it compare? Like, what do you see?
Well, I think that, there's the similarities in terms of the feeling like you're, you want to make sure that you've had impact. And, obviously during those times, everything comes out, right? You have regrets about some of the things you didn't do. If you have time left, you're thinking about how can I use that time maybe to fulfill my bucket list and do fun things, or maybe you want to do something with impact. I really think everyone's different. But I think that there's something interesting about men, which is, something you just pinpointed, which is that there is something about us that deep down we want to have an impact, and we want to know that our life was not for nothing. I don't mean to go back to Braveheart, but since you brought it up, it's like,
Hey, I
you
don't
know,
mind.
yeah, William Wallace, right? He wanted to know that he was going to secure freedom for his people, right? There's something
Right.
about,
A cause bigger than yourself.
exactly. And it's an interesting topic that, frankly, we could spend probably multiple hours talking about.
And we
But
often
it,
do.
right, we often do. But I think that is a common denominator. And I was interested in your bucket list. We haven't talked a lot about bucket lists in the past. But when we do talk about it, it's never things on your list that are like, I want to go to Venice or things of that nature. You're kind of wired a little differently. So getting back to that, in terms of your purpose and where you are, I don't want to dig into what that purpose is right now, but when you're having this inner dialogue and maybe you're talking, to God, as you said, in terms of your spiritual life, are you also thinking about, well, let's assume this goes well, and now I get sort of a second chance to do some things differently? Are you also thinking like, hey, if I get great news coming out of this surgery, I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to commit to this, or I'm going to recommit to that, or I'm going to change directions. Like, are you having some of those thoughts too?
That's a great question because, Suzanne and I, at the 4-month post-surgery mark, I got blood work done and I was cancer free, and we were celebrating big. That's like the big first hurdle.
Right.
And the side effects are diminishing, which is
Right.
more great news. And then I have blood work done next month to see, if I continue on my trend.
Right.
And so I'm feeling like, and my surgeon and my other doctor friend are like, you're like the poster child. I mean, you're coming out of this thing beautifully so far. I didn't feel as joyous because I'm still having to wear a diaper, but everything's improving. I'm putting weight back on, my energy's up. And so I really feel like so far, I'm getting that second chance. And so I'm in that process of not just philosophizing about the answer to that question, but I'm really seeking to answer that question right now. What will I do differently in my life? And I can tell you what, you'll laugh because we always talk about this, but there's 2 movies that just come to mind immediately.
Oh gosh.
One is Ferris Bueller, One Man's
Right.
Struggle to Relax, and the other one is Office Space. Dude, you don't need $1 million to do nothing. And
Right.
so one of the things I'm trying to do differently is I am honestly trying to work less. I work and have worked for the last, I mean, I started working officially when I was 16, and I've been working like a dog ever since, and put myself through engineering school, you know, blah, blah, blah. Um, work, work, work. I would, I am trying, one thing I'm doing differently is I'm trying to work less and I'm trying to enjoy people more. My family, my friends, I'm trying to enjoy life more. I mean, one of the things on my bucket list is to, you know, run the Western States 100, the most difficult ultra marathon and the oldest and most prestigious ultra marathon in America. Super difficult to get into. I have no business trying to get into it. It'll take a miracle for me to get into it, but that's on my bucket list. That's a fun thing I'm doing on the side. But you know what I'm coming, some of the conclusions I'm having to come to is, you know, for me to work less, enjoy people more, invest in people even more, and I've spent decades now investing in people, I have to cut other things out. And so I'm living through the process of trying to decide what to prune. I'm 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 trying to stay more calm about things, which those who know me know that that's a big challenge for me. I get pretty excited, and you know, I get pretty volatile in my personality, Italian and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm in that process right now. I don't have complete answers yet, but I am committed to working less.
Right.
I don't think I don't think I think hard work has a ton of value, and in different seasons of life, it's absolutely necessary. But I do think we as Americans, I think we're off on our, you know, work life. I don't like to say work life balance because there is no balance in life. It's you live for your values and you live for the people in your life, and that's a good life, you know, for me. But I think we take some things way too serious. And I think a lot of things, if we're smart and work smart, will work themselves out for themselves where we don't have to work as much. That's just a whole nother conversation though.
Yeah, sure. I mean, one thing I can tell you is I haven't heard a lot of people towards the end of their life talking about how they wish they had worked more, and that's like a cliche statement, but
I think it's true though.
it does. Well, I mean, I've had a lot of those conversations. I've never heard anybody say that they wanted to work more. They wish they worked more. I've heard people say they
Yeah.
wish they had worked less. Um, but I think the a lot of the sentiments that you're sharing, I mean, that's got to be what everyone, I mean, at least to me, should do. It's always good to think all the time, what should I do differently? But you're facing a lot of outcomes that, might dictate, hey, maybe you won't get back to full recovery, or maybe you won't have, all your functions back, and maybe your life will be different, or you may not make it, or maybe, your diagnosis will come back a lot more negatively.
All those things come to mind because they could all become a reality really quick. And the surgeons and doctors are quick to remind you of all those things.
Sure.
They give you worst case scenarios. And believe me, the time I'm sitting in the surgeon's office and he's giving me the worst case scenarios talk, it was a very difficult 2-hour appointment.
Yeah, sure.
It was really hard.
Right. Yeah, he's got a whole team of lawyers, that have prepped him for that for that conversation. Right. Here's everything that can go wrong.
Yeah, you would know about that. I mean, and it's a significant list.
Sure.
Not only the surgery, but the anesthesiologist too has to go through all that.
Sure. Of course. So, you gave us a little preview of, how your outlook is. I want to just switch back for a minute into like surgery recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that during this time, this was a tough period for you, and it was really quite humbling, for you. And so, let's just take us back to, we don't have to go through the whole surgery and all that stuff, but, post-op, you come out of surgery, And now you're, basically dealing with that reality. Take me back there and what that was like.
Okie doke. Yeah. One thing I want to say, though, that I think is interesting is my anesthesiologist, um, who puts, obviously for a living, puts a lot of people under, um, to asleep before surgery, and then has to wake them up. And, he said to me, I thought it was really interesting. He said to me, I wish people went under the way you went under. He's like, you were totally at peace, totally calm. And I'm not patting myself on the back at all. What I'm saying is he was alluding to the fact that most people, when going under anesthesia, in his limited experience, even though he's done this for a lot of years, but he's only one anesthesiologist, most people are, as they're going under, are quite nervous and fearful and terrified. Um, I think that's a picture into where a lot of people are living nowadays. Um, and that's a whole nother side thing. But I think my observation is, because I deal with a lot of people every day, is a lot of people are struggling with a lot of fear and a lot of negativity. And it's epidemic, more than COVID. And it's having, I think, a worse impact. So I do think it's important, to understand like what's going on inside. And I think these conversations you and I are having are important for that reason. I hope it stirs up things in others to get them to think about, not avoid it, but take it head on, and hopefully come out very positive. And that was the same thing with my surgery. It was a 5-hour surgery. I don't know if I mentioned this, but going into surgery, I was a total lightweight when it came to drugs, because I haven't been on prescription drugs or over-the-counter drugs since 1994. So what's that? It's 22. So 28 years, no prescription drugs, no over-the-counter drugs. Maybe, I think, coming into the surgery, somewhere along the line, I think I had to take one antibiotic for one day. First time I had to take anything in decades. Couple, maybe a Tylenol once or twice in the last 28 years. So my anesthesiologist was concerned on how was my body going to react to the anesthesia. And there were a lot of question marks. And I had a really hard time coming out of anesthesia, because my body wasn't used to it. And I was told, and my wife was kind of freaking out while it was happening, I was breathing, but they couldn't, at first, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but it was difficult for me to wake up. Mm-hmm. And when I woke up, I was seeing double vision and the room was spinning, which maybe is not uncommon, but I woke up about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and that went on until about 10 p.m. in the evening. And so that was pretty disorienting, especially I probably hadn't experienced anything like that since my binge drinking days as a teenager. But that was really weird. And I was trying to just get my bearing of like, wow, my brain's not kind of working right now, because I'm seeing things weird, and the room is moving, and everything's double vision. So that was the first thing. And then I had these tubes hanging out of my body, and they get you up to your room, but like before that, like my heart rate tends to run very low. Like in the 40s, like when I'm resting, and in the 50s, like when I'm up and about. Well, I guess the nurse in charge at the time wasn't used to seeing that low of heart rate. And so she was thinking something was wrong, and she was telling Suzanne possibly something was wrong, and Suzanne was getting scared. And I was just like, all right, wait a second, everybody, before you start flipping out, you got to calm down here. That's my heart rate normally. I'm okay. So my brain's not working right. The room's spinning. I'm seeing weird, but it was interesting. I was still in this mode, like, I need to take care of Suzanne. I need to take care of myself. I need to kind of settle down, the medical people. I mean, they were great. And I understand they have vast experience, and, the people they're dealing with may not be, ultra runners or whatever. That's very uncommon, I guess. But that was all part of the experience that I remember. And I was super weak, like so weak that like I needed help to get off the bed, which I was kind of like, well, let me do it myself. But it was like, no, you might fall over. And I had lost so much weight, dude. I was skinny as a rail, like coming into the surgery and after the surgery. I mean, I was middle school weight as a grown man, and I was just fragile, and I had bags hanging out of me, and I was hurting. And they get me up to my room finally about 10 o'clock that night. And then of course, you're on all these bells and whistles, and the alarms are going off constantly because my heart rate is so low. Normally it's lower than I think what they had the alarm set for. So the alarm's going off like every 10 minutes. And I'm like, hey guys, can you set this thing lower? Because otherwise, it's just going to keep going off. But it went off for hours like that. And, the nurses were great, and they're working as hard as they can, but you're just laying there and you're like a piece of meat, and you're, it's like you want to get up and go to the bathroom. It's like, oh, I can't because I don't have to. I've got this catheter and I've got a pee bag, and, they've got to empty this thing. And, it was just, you don't sleep a wink. I didn't sleep a wink that night. So I was like, okay, I can't sleep. So what am I going to do? I'm going to get up and walk. So they said, your goal is to walk around the nurses station 6 times. And, I ended up walking for several hours. They were all cheering for me because I was just walking around in my little nightgown, covering my rear end, and pulling along I had this monitor on me and these bags. I had my pee bag I had hooked from my gown. So, I mean, I was looking like a disaster, but just walking around in the middle of the night, just taking steps, saying, well, now that I've had the surgery, I'm on the road to recovery, and I need to focus on that.
So what was it like when you were walking? Was it, did you get your feet underneath you pretty quickly, or were you thinking like, I mean, was it painful, or what was that like?
I mean, me, I'm kind of a stubborn Italian, so I'm pretty determined. I felt like I got my feet underneath me pretty quickly, but I did hurt. The steps were very small, and I was moving very slow, but the goal for me was to move and make as many laps as I could, because I felt like movement meant circulation, and circulation helps with healing. And
Sure.
Since I wasn't going to be able to sleep with all the alarms going off, I mean, ideally it would have been best to sleep and just get up and walk for a little bit and then sleep some more. But I couldn't sleep with the lights and the alarms and the people in and out. And all right, it's time to take this thing. And, your stomach hurts because with the anesthesia you can't really go to the bathroom. So your stomach's like all knotted up kind of thing, your bowels. So that was very uncomfortable. Of course, where I had 5 incisions where the robotic arms went in. So some of those sites are, hurting. And you can't, I can't remember, but I don't think you can eat or drink much of anything yet. And so you're hungry, you have no energy, but you're moving and you can't sleep. So I would walk a bunch and then I'd watch Sports Center. I say, all right, good. I got Sports Center on my TV. All right, let me get a sports fix here, and I'll kill some time with this, and then I'll flip the channels a little bit. And I'll find something else, and I'll read some, and and then I'll get up and walk some more. But I couldn't wait to get out of the hospital. I was stir crazy in that place.
Right.
So the next day they said, all right, I think we can check you out in the afternoon. I was like, great. I'm going to try to take a shower. Well, being all entangled in all these tubes and bags and monitor, and um, I decided not to wait for the nurse. I was like, I can do this myself. But I, it like just to take a shower, I think took me like an hour and a half. And the only reason it was that quick is because Suzanne showed up when I was about halfway through the shower and helped me kind of finish, because you're just not moving very well, and you can't lift, your legs very well, and everything is just like a major chore, and you got to move all the bags around so that they're not getting in the way. And it's just makes you appreciate not having all that stuff hanging out of your body when
Right.
it finally came out.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to get, lost in this story. I mean, obviously you had amazing medical care, right? I mean, you're at University of
Yes.
Florida, Shands, and,
Top
that's
medical
like
care,
one of
no
the
doubt.
best hospitals. I mean, in the US, in all likelihood, I don't know what their exact rating is, and I'm not even sure that matters, but it's a phenomenal hospital. The surgeon you had is the best in
Yeah,
Gainesville's
over
done so many of these
4,000 of these
procedures.
surgeries he's done. Over 4,000.
Absolutely. And, and if you look at the technology now, I mean, you had the robotic surgery,
Mhm.
it's very minimally invasive compared to what it used to be. Right.
Absolutely.
And
Mhm.
so, the only purpose in talking about this is, it's still challenging, right? I mean, you're still going through a surgical procedure, and, coming out of that is not, despite the fact that everything went great. And, the surgeon said, total success, there's still a challenging and difficult recovery. And the days, weeks, and months after were extremely tough for you.
Yeah, the week after was tough. I was weak. I was so calorically deficient that my body was having a hard time generating heat, so I was cold a lot. Um, a tube somehow got irritated my bowels, and in the middle of the night, one night about midnight, I was in so much pain, um, and I decided I wasn't going to go to the ER, so I had to make it through the night in total pain. And Suzanne said she had never seen me in so much pain, like I could barely take a step. and and then I had to go get a CT scan the next day. And so I had to get to the place. I had to get out of the car. I had to get onto the table. And there were times when I was like, gosh, I don't know if I can do it. Like, I don't quit easy, but I wasn't sure I could keep doing it. I was hurting so bad, but it was amazing. As soon as they pulled that tube out, it was like 95% of the pain went away. And after that, things were on the incline. So the first week was rough. That midnight to 3 p.m. the next day, that was like a week after surgery, was brutal. And then after that, everything was just working its way up week after week, month after month. I did catch COVID in there in the interim. Um, Fortunately, I didn't get it that bad. I was pretty run down. So, that added a new challenge for an extra week in that healing process.
Right. So you're used to training for big events, long
Mhm.
distance runs. And obviously that's an entire, that's a process, a training process to get yourself ready. When you compare the post op, you know, process for you trying to get back to, you know, where I think you'd like to be, which is, basically ground zero is you come out of the operating room, and where you want to be is you want to be back racing and running long distance races. Um, how challenging is that relative to, just preparing for a marathon or preparing for, one of the events that you've done, maybe not the 100-mile race, that's its own beast, but something that someone can relate to, like a marathon.
Uh-huh. Well, I always say to my clients, consistency is your friend. So, I felt like recovery is a lot like training, because you just day by day, moment by moment, you tackle one thing at a time, and you tackle one challenge at a time, and you do You do one thing at a time that's going to help you to heal. And it's the same way like in training. Like I have a periodization in my training where different seasons, like you have, base training, pre-race, race specific, then you do the race, and then it's post race, and then it's recovery, and then you have another new season. And so everything's planned out, for me, typically weeks and months in advance, training for races. And that works well for my personality. That works well for me very much. I love consistency. To me, recovery is difficult. Both training and recovery are painful. Both of them are difficult, but recovery was difficult because to me, there was a lot more mystery to it. There was a lot more at stake, a lot more frustration because you can't do things initially that you could before, like that were just normal things you took for granted. Now, all of a sudden you can't do them, like
Right.
you're struggling to get out of the chair,
Right.
When I first started, like in recovery, I was like, my goal was to get 2,000 steps a day, and that would have been like a good day. Then I reached 2,000, which meant I could go outside. I was going outside and walking to the mailbox and walking around a little bit and coming back in. And I was trying to get to 2,000 steps throughout the whole day. Then it was 5,000. Then it was 10,000, 20,000, whatever. I'm used to training about, 1 to 2 hours a day at least. So just getting 2,000 steps, I was rejoicing, and that would be like nothing compared to my training. But you start celebrating all the little victories. And so it's in training and recovery, the same thing. You set little micro goals and you meet them one step at a time, and you celebrate each one to keep yourself encouraged, to keep yourself positive, keep your mindset right. But recovery is so frustrating because, to me, at least in my experience, my body was taking longer to respond positively than I was used to. And so I had to stay more focused. I had to keep my mindset more focused, more positive than even training. Because training, for me, the victories come quicker. With recovery, they're slow, and sometimes you don't even notice them. And I had some setbacks at times, like, with the tube on my bowel was a major setback because I couldn't eat for like days, because my digestive system was just hurting so bad. Even though the pain went away, like the acute pain went away, my bowels were still irritated and weren't working. And so I was afraid to eat because I thought, is it going to get worse and stuff like that. So there were more unknowns in recovery than in training.
Right.
And that made it, to me, parts of recovery were much more challenging. But because I had the training experience, to me, I was just kind of able to kind of push through each one the same way I would when training.
Right. And you did a fair amount of physical therapy, right? I mean, you were, especially, different exercises to make sure you can minimize the effects of the ED, the effects of the incontinence.
Yes.
You've been doing a lot of that.
Exercises I had to do every day.
Right. And you've obviously been doing them every day, like you like you tend to do.
I have, but my physical therapist was a little frustrated with me because, and she called me out on it at one point, because again, I there were times when I struggled with some self-pity and some bitterness because I was working so hard when I had so little energy. I was working on these exercises. I wasn't feeling good. I had little energy. I wasn't eating very much. I was skinny as a rail, and I'm doing these exercises and I wasn't getting the results that I thought I should be getting in this period of time. And she's like, "You're just bitter about this, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm, embarrassed to say." that, yeah, I guess I am. I'm struggling with some bitterness. Like I'm being kind of a spoiled brat. Um, you know, I'm under the illusion that because I work hard, I should get good results. And the truth of the issue is, you know, you do the best you can and you work hard in hopes that you get good results, increasing the probability that you'll get good results. But there's not a guarantee. Like, I don't control as much as I think I can control. And coming to that realization, and you would think, you know, hey, person of faith, you know, you God's in control, this and that. But, you know, I'm a human being and I have my own issues to deal with. And it was like, I was thinking wrongly, like, hey, if I work really hard at my physical therapy, I should get great results quick. And when that wasn't the reality, I was getting bitter about it. And I had to change my perspective. I had to have a more honest and realistic perspective. You know,
Right.
continue to do the therapy, but, you know, get a good attitude here, you know, instead of being a baby.
Right. And when you're talking about, like, what were the results that you weren't getting that were frustrating?
Well, two things. The two things that, and it's a little embarrassing for me to say, but the two things that were the most challenging initially were, like, I was already getting back to running and stuff like that. That came pretty quick. That wasn't too much of a problem. I think within a couple of weeks, I was already running again post surgery. But I was frustrated with my incontinence, which essentially meant wearing a diaper and leaking urine, like at times when your pelvic floor is fatigued and can't, you know, when you cut the prostate out, they cut out one of your safety valves. And so I know all the pregnant women out there are saying, stop being such a crybaby, welcome to our world. But, and I definitely feel much greater compassion for my female clients at times, you know, when they're like, they're jumping around and saying, wait a sec, I got to stop jumping. But, you know, I was trying to get quicker results on the incontinence. And I also wanted to see, you know, the ED issue, the erectile dysfunction issue diminishing, you know, because my wife and I want to engage in activities, and I felt pressure that, you know, I need to get this solved, and it's not happening fast enough. And they warned me it was going to take a little while, and it is going well, but I was getting a little bit greedy, I think.
Right. Well, telling you it's going to take a long time, it's like you might as well not even say it, you know, because it's just, you're just wasting your time because you just listen to that and you go, yeah, I know. For, you know, it might take some people a long time, but for me, it's just going to be like nothing. You know,
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't
a
know how many
born
of those
skeptic, and
conversations.
I'm also born impatient.
Right. Right. And yeah, I think that that's got to be, I mean, I obviously have not had that surgery or had any side effects, but I mean, that's got to be pretty tough for any, you know, man to deal with, right? You go back to being in diapers, you go back to having erectile dysfunction issues. You know, it's obviously a big part of
Well, there
married
was no
life.
going back. This was the first time, so it was kind of like a rude awakening.
Well, going back to when you're a baby.
Yeah, I guess that's, yeah. It does definitely make you feel a little bit more vulnerable, you know, like maybe you're not as tough as you think you are.
Right. Right. And, you know, obviously, you know, big part of married life, hopefully, is you know, being able to share things with your wife, and that, you know, was challenging too, right? As you said. And, you know, has that, do you feel like that's on a positive trajectory, Matt, that the more time and space you've given it and the more work you've put into it, do you feel like it's getting better and better and better, or
Oh,
how's that
absolutely.
going?
Absolutely. It's getting better, better, and better. And Suzanne has been a great support in the whole process and very patient and understanding. I've been the impatient one, not her. Um, so yeah, I do think it's paying off. I do think the physical therapy is important. I think, to me, physical therapy is way more important than drugs. Um, again, gross generality. I'm not a medical person, and I'm not trying to tell people, whatever. I'm just saying that to me, what I understand about the human body is that when it's not sleeping and resting, it loves to move. And so, stretching, range of motion, physical therapy, movement, getting off your end and getting out there and just moving around and fresh air and sunlight. I think all those things have contributed to not only my mental well-being, but the acceleration of my healing, which my medical people that are monitoring me are saying I'm doing great with, and
Right.
I'm seeing very positive results.
Was there ever a time in there? I mean, you talked about like self-pity, but I mean, we're close friends, and there's always times when you are really struggling with something, and it feels like, the mountain is just too high to climb, and you just start to go into like this dark place where you're like, oh, this is my reality. It's never going to get any better. Did you ever have any of those moments?
There were some dark days. I tend to be pretty optimistic overall. I definitely struggle at times. My mother, God bless her, when she was alive, she dealt with significant bipolar disorder. I'm not a stranger to seeing depression and in people. I think I've had, in my lifetime, there were 2 times I can remember where I dealt with some significant clinical depression, where there were too many dark days in a row. Not there during this, but there were days at times where I felt like life has gotten too hard. Like, I always felt like life was pretty challenging. Some of it is self-inflicted. Some of it has been just circumstantially. But, when the most basic things, getting to the bathroom in time, not being able to eat, or because your stomach's hurting, and you can only eat certain things for a bit, and you've lost. I mean, I lost 28 pounds. I was never huge, but I lost 28 pounds from peak weight to lowest weight during this whole journey. That was extremely significant.
Yeah, that's a lot.
People
It's
were,
probably what, like
people were
what
looking
were
at
you,
me and
100,
like, oh my
180
God.
pounds? You about
Yeah.
180 pounds beforehand. So that's a big percentage of your body weight.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was 188 at the top, and I was down to like 159, 160 at the bottom.
Wow.
It was pretty, and I'm 6'1". So, I mean, I just looked so fragile. My face was all sunken. And there were times when I felt like this is just too hard, because while I'm recovering, all my work's just piling up. The chores that I'm normally responsible for are piling up. I love to do my yard work. I love to do certain things. Not love, most of the time I love it. Sometimes it's a pain in the neck. And it's all just piling up. And so there were some dark moments and dark days, but usually not more than a few days in a row. And then I could come out of it.
Right. What I mean, you talked about how you've dealt with some clinical, sort of depression before. Do you feel like when you get into those spots now, you're able to, regulate it better because of, your past experiences? Or, I mean, why do you think it is that, when versus before, when you would have these, many bad days in a row versus, now you're actually dealing with something where you could potentially have a lot of really bad days in a row, but you don't. What do you think is the difference for you?
Well, part of my coaching is mental coaching with people. And so it's a hard question to answer. It's a simple question to answer, and it's a hard question to answer. I'd say the simple part is there are skills that are proven skills that will help you regulate negative emotions and negative moods, okay, which are pretty synonymous. Okay. So there are skills that I think people should learn to apply when they feel what I call the nose of their plane going down. So when I feel the nose of my plane going down, I implement skills. That's the easy part. The challenging part is in my value system and in my belief system, which is not a popular one. I believe that, God gives me the abilities that he gives me to use for good. And some of that good is to help myself. Some of that is to help others, and so that's why I feel like one of the skills I implement when my nose of my plane's going down is, instead of running away from God and being bitter at God and blaming God, I just have a very honest conversation with him. So my conversations have become more honest. And if I'm upset, I tell him, he already knows in my way of seeing it, he already knows, might as well be honest with him. He's a big boy. He can handle it. And so, so I think it's the combination of working out my spiritual life when the plane is going down, and getting that nose back up and leveled off at 30,000 feet. And the older I've gotten and the more honest I've gotten with myself and God, and the more I've implemented breathing skills, visualization skills, positive, realistic self-talk skills, all those things allow me to pop out of it quicker. Plus, I also build my truth base in my left hemisphere of my brain, which the emotional part of your brain draws from when it's struggling with negative emotions. The things you put in your brain have a huge impact. What you watch, what you read, what you tell yourself. And so, I am trying to build a much bigger positive truth base in my left brain, so that when my right brain needs it, it can draw from that. So I memorize key quotes. I get time with inspiring people and listen to their story and listen and watch how they do things. I read inspiring materials, ancient texts, that have stood the test of time. I read not just like self-help books, even though I read those too, but I want like substantial, proven, meta-analysis or historically proven stuff that will inspire me and energize me in a positive way, because some of my natural tendencies will want to energize me in a negative way and get me feeling alone and feeling sorry for myself and feeling like I'm not going to make it.
Right. Yeah. And I remember, kind of talking, to you through that time. And I never really got the sense that you were really, really struggling. It was like, you were able to kind of just keep pushing forward. And I think it was interesting, to me, because I've been with you during times when you've really felt like you were, the nose of the plane was was about to hit the ground, and this just didn't feel like one of those times, despite the fact that I felt like the conditions set up for it, pretty well. Your recovery was not easy, and it doesn't continue to be easy, but you never really let your mental side totally, you never lost control of that. And, I found that to be super interesting. I think, look, I think we should cut it because I think we've been going for some time and we don't want to make these too long. People, they can get into, they can kind of get in and out and, get on to the next one. But, in the next one, we're really going to talk about Andy's outlook. What does it look like from here? Obviously, he wants to run some pretty wild races. He texted me the other day and was like, hey, I want to run this race and that race. And one of them was over 100 miles. And I was like, wow, that's super aggressive.
Yeah, maybe
so,
a little too aggressive.
Yeah.
That's what my other buddy told me. He's like, might be a little too soon for that, but
right.
Appreciate your enthusiasm. I hope he's thinking.
Right.
Yeah. Because right now I'm only running about, 4 or 5 miles a pop, which, normally I'd be running a lot more. So it's been a very humbling process. I had to start back at like 1 mile, baby steps. So,
and how long are you removed from surgery?
I am, oh gosh, I had surgery first week of December. So the first week of June, I think, is six months.
Right. So you were running, you said like 60, 80 miles a week, right, beforehand.
Yeah.
And now you're running,
I mean, I did spike up to 35 miles a week, but then I got into this massive stretching regimen and my body kind of freaked out. And so now I'm down at like 15 to 20 miles a week until I can open up some more of the tissue, because this was another effective surgery. I thought the time off from running after surgery that my muscles would loosen up. And because I was so inactive, they actually got tighter, and they were so tight that even though like I was back up to running 35 miles a week, something wasn't right and it didn't feel right. So I shut it down and I went to massive amounts of stretching every day. And that generated a whole new issues and circumstances. But now I'm finally starting to feel good running again. I've run 4+ miles the last couple of days and felt good and ran pretty well. And I'm not tightening back up. So the stretching's working and I have more to do, but I'm not training I'm not even in the base phase yet of training. Like I'm pre-base phase, which means I am probably 16 to 20 weeks. If everything went great from here on out, I'm 16 to 20 weeks away from doing a good race.
Right. And so we're going to talk about that and talk about what what that looks like. Is obviously coming out of this period and you've gotten some good a good health prognosis so far. And we'll talk about that in more detail next time. But now it's like, what's next? Right now it's on to, okay, you're feeling like, how far can I go now? And that's a whole nother set of challenges. And I know that you're also thinking a lot deeper about what this means for you in terms of your life purpose now that you have probably at least a bit more time. So
let's hope so. Let's hope that continues. I think I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about how my choices affect my key relationships, because I do think your quality of your relationships, the depth and quality of those shared experiences with significant others, I do think are the core of life. And so every decision I make affects my relationships. And so I'm thinking about all those things at once, and because they're all intertwined.
Right. And we're going to go into that next time. So thanks again to everyone for listening. Thanks again, Andy. This has been the Fully Live Podcast, episode 2. Again, we would appreciate any feedback or comments that anybody has, any questions anybody wants us to dig into. But other than that, we're off. Thanks, Andy.
Hey, thanks everyone, and keep living life big.
Appreciate it. Thanks again.